And welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Agentic Insurer. My name is Nick Lamparelli. I will be your co-pilot for this episode. This is episode 4, Autonomy or Anarchy, Solving the Governance Problem. We think about AI and tech as like, oh my God, look how awesome it is. Let's completely run with it. But we do have a governance issue. We are a financial institution, so we have to solve that. My guest today is Lauren Beck from Shift Technology. Lauren, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Lauren, we start all of these by allowing our guest a little bit of an elevator pitch. Lauren, who are you and what do you do?
I'm the Chief Legal Officer at Shift Technology. I've been with them about 4.5 years, and I'm responsible for anything legal, compliance, and privacy.
Okay.
So I'm one of the boring people that everyone love to hate.
Boring but necessary. And we had a really wonderful discussion before we hit the record button on your take on governance and the trade-off that's trying to occur. And what you said was absolutely brilliant, which is like, how do we move fast while still maintaining the product solution and the things that kind of make us a financial institution? Let's jump right into that. Your take on governance and how an insurance organization is balancing the trade-off.
Okay, so to be to be honest, it's not new what the result is. It's just how we're getting there. So the governance hasn't really changed. The process may need to be governed, but the output at the end has always been governed and will always be governed the same way. So everyone has to be accountable for the decisions being made. The fact that the AI may now be assisting with the decisions, that still needs to be governed, and how we get there needs to be understood. So the upshot to say is, if a claim is going to be denied, it's going to be denied regardless of whether AI
Mm-hmm.
is being used. The question is, why was it denied? Was it denied for the same reasons that it would have been denied had AI not been used? So you're looking really at the input. So good input means good output. And generally, what we see AI doing is allowing us much more input in much less time. So the decisions are more efficient, and claims can be paid more rapidly. That would be the example we were using then.
Yeah, and Lauren, from a regulatory standpoint, some states, California in particular, that's the one that kind of stands out. They've already put some initial rules in place around having a human in the loop. Can you? That is a big difference. Like, we're trying to kind of do the same thing. Like, a claim's going to be denied. I think where regulators in particular are nervous is like, but was there a human in the loop? Did you do it the exact same way? So can you talk about that part and
Yeah,
how and basically the sort of the timeline and how, like, in the initial stages there'll probably be a lot of humans in the loop, but the goal is to get to an autonomous kind of reckoning where the AI can do things, but it's still being watched by humans. I think that's what regulators are looking at from a legal perspective. How do you sort of view that part?
well, there's two aspects. So, from a legal perspective, for the company I work for, we are a SaaS provider. So, we do not want to be the decision maker. That would make us an insurer and subject to all the insurance regulations, which don't pertain to us as a business
Mm-hmm.
normally.
Yep.
So, we look for a human in the loop to make sure that our customers are making the insurance decisions, be it underwriting, claims payment, or anything else insurance related. The human in the loop for us is making sure that any AI systems being implemented are making the correct decisions, and there are no questions of bias or unfairness. However, you set an AI system up, it will eventually, over time, modulate itself and try and get more efficient. And you have to make sure that those outputs are still representative of what's been input, and that the AI hasn't started swaying one way or the other and making decisions that shift or another vendor wouldn't make because they've got the human intelligence.
Yeah.
So it's all about how you use it and making sure there is oversight that the AI probably is unable to do efficiently at the moment and to escape insurance regulation.
So I know Shift was not the creator of the Arise model, but we have discussed that in other episodes here. It seems like that Arise model, the acronym, that step by step kind of releasing of or letting the leash out for AI would be a good governance model as well. Just always allowing a human in the loop and slowly, let's say, climbing the staircase on complexity and autonomy as well. Can you talk a little bit about that part and potentially using that model as a framework to allow the governance to kind of evolve with the AI within an organization?
I'm not sure it can proceed like that from a compliance
Mm-hmm.
perspective. If you look at the EU AI Act, they always want human oversight. So however good the AI system is going to be and how you think it's going to be governed, you're not ever going to be able to have AI governing itself, an AI system governing an AI system. You're always going to have someone auditing the system to make sure that the results are representative of what's been input and that there has been no bias.
So, Lauren, from a compliance standpoint, how might an organization think about the guardrails piece? We've talked about human in the loop, but there needs to be other guardrails as well. We can't, the human in the loop might not be adequate enough to sort of protect the organization from compliance issues. What might an organization do to establish the guardrails for the entire, human and AI system?
I think a lot depends on what the AI system is going to do. So the best way I can discuss it is from the perspective I've been experiencing with Shift. As you know, our customers are all insurers. So what we are doing for them is generally trying to make more efficient their decision making process. But much of the data we use to do that is personal data belonging to their customers. Because of that, we have to be very careful. It's not just AI governance that we have to manage. As importantly, or most importantly, it's the privacy aspect because it's people's personal data. And when you start feeding that into AI, you have to make sure that it's being protected, it's not being spread all over the web, it's compartmentalized and isolated, and also that you have the right permissions to process that data in that way. So for us, our guardrails initially would be that we have permission to use the data in AI systems, um, and then have a policy whereby all our employees know what data they can put into AI, and the reason for putting that data into AI, and they're sticking to that purpose. And then making sure that we're auditing the output so we know that the AI systems are doing what they're meant to be doing internally. We're also looking forward to having external audits annually as well to comply with the EU AI Act and, more importantly, our customer obligations. Most of our customers now are asking for audit rights and that we can show that we are compliant with AI regulations, be those EU or the North American insurance industry ones that are, becoming more and more popular.
Yeah. And so that's become a common theme through these episodes is you can't just run into AI. You can't just like start implementing it. Like you almost have to start from, um, you know, brass tacks and essentially as an organization map out what is it that we're trying to do and how is it that we're trying to do it. That will, Lauren, that will naturally lead to, for a lot of these, like who's going to be accountable for this, right? So sure, there'll be like a corporate decision making mapping for this, but at every stage, someone has to sort of be accountable for the governance as a legal person that's that handles compliance and governance all the time. How might an insurance organization begin to delegate that sort of accountability? Who should be accountable?
And I think that is a mixture of everyone involved. Typical lawyer answer. So let's start with the insurer. The insurer is accountable because what they give us is what we're inputting. So if they're giving us rubbish, we're going to get rubbish out. So we need to know that the data being provided to provide the answers and services they want is reliable, up to date, accurate. That hasn't changed. We've always requested that that be the case, but it seems to me as soon as there's a new uh, fashionable thing to make life more efficient, and at the moment it's AI, people forget the fundamentals and start looking at the process rather than the fundamentals. And my mantra, at least my team will tell you, is that let's not lose the fundamentals. Is if everyone is still remains responsible for what they were responsible before we used AI, everything should work. So assuming we've got good data going in, which the customer has provided us, assuming we are checking the data we're enriching it with, which we do,
Mm-hmm.
then what we're looking at is the AI system. But as long as we are auditing it, making sure that what's coming out makes sense, and that's where human intervention and oversight, I think, plays a huge part, making sure there's no bias or things aren't looking unreasonable, then the results go to back to the customer, and it's the customer's decision how much credence they want to put on the results we're giving them. Now, obviously, to be paid, we need to make sure that we're giving them a service that they can rely on. But to us, the key part of the human oversight is then the customer making the decision on whether they use what we've given them, they have enough information, or they need more. And that then goes back to them, but that's always been the case as well. So really, it's about automation and efficiency.
What's very interesting in your last two answers was there clearly is a role for the vendor here. I mean, I think we are in such new territory that um, companies are reaching out to the vendor and asking for help, asking for guidance around that. It feels like there's a shift change. I use the word shift. It feels like there's a shift change there, though, around basically buyers of technology looking to the technology vendor as well for guidance around that. And it seems like they're reaching out to you and you guys are providing some guidance around that, and it's less transactional. Have you seen that as well?
Um, yes, whenever something new comes along, we are they will ask us more questions. So invariably, and a good example, let's say it is the EU AI Act, we will then see pages and pages of schedules saying that we comply with the act, and do we do this, do we do that. Usually it's not necessary because we say we comply with applicable law, but because everyone is very wary about what they don't
Mm-hmm.
know, and it's usually what they don't know what they don't know, it's easier to put the whole thing in and then have a discussion about it. And that's how I've seen the implementation of AI going. Everyone wants to use it and jump on the bandwagon, but they're slightly wary on how they use it. Is it lawful? Are they okay to use it in the industry they work in? And what will the repercussions be if it goes wrong? And this is again where I draw it back to personal data is the big one, and that's not anything to do with AI. In that respect, AI systems are data processing systems. So what we really want to be concerned with here is the data. And as long as we're protecting the data, doing what the customers told us we can do with the data, and checking the results of the AI system, then generally you're mitigating risk that may cause issue later on.
Yeah. I, Lauren, I kind of want to finish off this particular episode to talk about the importance of putting governance kind of like in a day one scenario. You know, as companies are sitting down discussing how are we going to do this, how are we going to structure this out and create a strategy, governance has to be, I think, a day one thing. You know, who's watching us. You brought up a really important point around AI is just a data processing technology as well, but it does it at such a massive scale that if you do get into regulatory trouble, this isn't a slap on the wrist kind of thing. You could be exposing yourself to an existential threat around that. Can you talk about the importance of establishing governance early on in everything from how an EU regulator or a US state regulator may act all the way up to the exposure to the board, right? And how they need to be part of the day one governance as well.
It's incredibly difficult. It's a challenge whenever there's a huge new piece of legislation that comes out governing how everyone does business. Invariably, it usually starts in the EU. We saw the GDPR, now we've got the EU AI Act, and we over here in the States follow, but it's usually piecemeal, as you know, state by state, unless
Hmm.
and until they decide to do something federally. So, rightly or wrongly, our governance initiative is usually led by the EU legislation. And what happens there is you'll follow it and it will change and it will be negotiated and discussed before it even becomes law. So you'll have a very good idea of what's coming and you can socialize. That's the time to socialize it with your data scientists, with your delivery team, and everyone else so they understand what they need to do to be compliant. The problem is, on paper, that sounds great, but let's talk practically. It doesn't happen. They are enthusiastic, can't wait to get going and do something groundbreaking that's going to make their lives so much easier, really impress our customers. So unfortunately, and I'm sure this is an industry-wide thing, people like us are chasing them to catch up and say, whoa, 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 put the brakes on. We need to do this properly so that it is compliant with the EUI Act. And more importantly, we can hand on heart say to customers, you can use this knowing that it's within the realms of reasonable use and you're not going to, you know, come up with issues.
Yeah. So you brought up the EU. Here we have state by state, and I think a lot of folks would be like, "Oh my God, we need to handle 50 different regulations." Can you talk about the NAIC and their role, because they have begun to produce recommendations, model guidance, as well around some of that. So it is a big threshold to kind of jump, but I think the NAIC is trying to create one standard that can work around that. Let's sort of finish off with what's happening here in the States and what the NAIC is trying to do right now.
Okay, so I mean, I've obviously been following it with enthusiasm and interest, and from what I see, it's very similar to the EU AI Act. So rightly or wrongly, at the moment, as we did with GDPR, we're using that as our litmus test, and only then doing extra if extra is needed, because the EU AI Act is all encompassing, and I haven't seen anything more that is required by the NAIC. In other words, so long as we continue to comply with the EU AI Act, we will be in good
Mm,
standing with the NAIC, much the same as all the privacy laws, save for California. And it will be interesting to see what happens there because usually they end up being more stringent.
yeah. It, I thought we were going to end there, but let's end. I think I want to try to put the importance of governance in place. Let's stay with the EU. The way they fine is based off of like the number of units of data that get exposed, and I want you to sort of answer like the stress test here, which centers around, because AI is so quick and so scalable, that the ability for an AI to release copious amounts of data should be, I think, warning enough for insurance organizations around the governance, because the AI can go berserk, right, and all of a sudden release millions of pieces of information. And the way the EU does it is, again, not a slap on the wrist. They look at the quantity, the volume, the scale itself will dictate the scale of the fine or the punishment around that. Let's finish off by focusing on the governance, the fine piece, which should lead to better governance. How does the EU handle misuse of personal data?
Okay, so that's under GDPR, and generally they will fine you a percentage of your global turnover. So it is not insignificant by any means. That said, where that comes into play with the AI systems, as long as you isolate your systems, which most enterprise functions are doing, data breach should be no more risky than it would have been before AI because you still had all that data. So the fact that we're now putting our customers' data with their permission into AI does not mean there's more data out there in the ether. It just means it's going through an AI system. But as long as the AI systems are isolated, and as you know, you can have them not isolated to one user, a company, a geography. You can choose, how you protect the data and where it sits. Then that's how you manage the risk. So for Shift, I don't believe our risk for data is any more than it was before we started using AI. What we need to be wary of, though, is that AI continues to be isolated in much the same way as we did before. Where
Yeah.
it isn't, or if someone uses an AI system that hasn't been approved or limited, then that's where the issues would arise.
It always comes down to proper risk management, and that that will sort of solve it. So, Lauren, that was very insightful. It's a great way to end this particular episode. And so, thank you everyone for joining. For my guest, Lauren Beck from Shift Technology, my name has been Nick Lamparelli. Stay tuned for additional episodes of the Agentic Insurer, and we'll see you next time.